All right, so in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about EMT, kind of what it's like going through the school, how to get into a program, and then what to expect afterwards if you're looking to enter the workforce as an EMT. So I got my EMT license years ago, and for that, there's a few kind of general requirements. I'm in California, so I'm sure some states have a few different rules, but this is kind of the general consensus. Being 18 years or older, getting your CPR card, and then a lot of places require stuff like a driver's license. Usually background checks are going to come later on, like after school, once you're like actually applying and starting to work for a company. But that's something to expect down the line. So background checks, fingerprint scans, medical exams, stuff like that, because you have to be fairly physically fit to be able to carry patients. And, you obviously just don't want to be a health risk when you're working long shifts and things like that. So I'll kind of get started with what it was like what it was like getting into the program before we get into working. So for me, I did a 12-week program, and that was once a week every Sunday. And so we went in at like 8 a.m., got done around 5 p.m. So pretty long days, but it was only once a week. So, I was able to work full time while I was going to school for that. And then just during the week, I was, you're pretty much just forced to study. They give you a big textbook. It's like some 1,500 page textbook. And within the program, you're going to be kind of split up into like the academic side as far as like lectures and book content material. And then the other half is going to be skills. So both are equally important. You have to know both. You have to be confident in both to not only get through the program, but also to be able to work successfully as an EMT. So within the course itself, it's going to be covering everything medical, and these textbooks are available. You can find them on eBay or on Amazon or anything like that. So some programs might let you buy the textbook when you sign up for the class. Others might want you to do it separately. I would just say do your research, and if it's something that you could do separately, then maybe buy that book early. And just like for the fire academy or, honestly, any college class or anything like that, it's like you want to try and get ahead of the curve. So just start familiarizing yourself with important terms, even if you can't get the book. I'm sure things like Quizlet and stuff. I know Quizlet helped me a lot for studying. So just getting yourself familiar with like the different medical terms, the sorts of like language and words that they use, and those sorts of specific terms are going to be really important because in this EMT class, especially for me being there once a week, other programs, it might be full time. Like some programs are there 5 times a week, 3 times a week, 2 times a week. It just depends on what kind of schedule works for you. That was what worked for me because I didn't want to cut back on any shifts. But with these programs, they're usually like fairly accelerated. So you want to be able to dedicate some time to study outside of the classroom hours, because there's just no way for an instructor to be able to cover that much material in that short amount of time. So focusing in on taking the extra time to study outside of class is something that's really important. But essentially, like, you're going to have kind of your basic stuff as far as like documentation, communication, ethics, HIPAA standards and like all that stuff like that. So like focusing on the laws, and that's definitely testable material. And then medically, I honestly, it's not super fun to sit down and read a textbook, but that's what worked for me. I was able to just like dedicate time outside of being in the class and just read the textbook. And that's like what helped me, just kind of highlighting stuff, going through it. Whether it's before class or after, and then you're kind of like already familiar with what they're talking about. And then when you read it, you can see it and take the time to kind of digest it. But it's going to be covering everything medically, like the human body, anatomy, physiology, pathophysiology, things like that. And then also the emergency response side of, now that we have that foundation of understanding the science and the anatomy behind, the patients and the people that we're dealing with, now it's about responding under pressure, and what we're going to do for treatment, what kind of transportation, things as far as like positioning your patient, as far as bleeding control, checking your ABCs, your airway, your bleeding, your your breathing, your circulation, like all sorts of stuff like that. Making sure that the C-spine is straight. So there's a lot of different things that go into it, and they're all very testable questions. So that's kind of the academic side of the class, is understanding the legal stuff, the documentation, the ethics, and the laws. And then the other portion, if I were to break it up into three, that would be one. The other three would just be, anatomy, physiology, understanding how the blood flows through the heart, like how the lungs fill with air, like basic stuff like that. Understanding like all the details and truly understanding like how it works is really important, especially when you start to learn about medical emergencies. Because if you don't understand, like let's say certain things about the heart, and then when you hear medical emergencies like cardiac tamponade or something like that, and then it's like, then you're kind of like working backwards on like, okay, well, let me learn more about this before I even understand that medical emergency. So the more that you understand about the anatomy and physiology of the body, the better and the easier it'll be for you to be able to put those two things together when it comes to the anatomy as well as the medical emergencies that EMTs and first responders commonly see. So those are like the main three categories I would say that I would break down the EMT academic side of things. And so those are things that you want to try and study for. It is a lot, just thinking of your whole body and everything that happens within it. There's a lot of stuff going on. So just try and, break it up one thing at a time. If you haven't started school yet, maybe just a chapter a day or a couple chapters a week, whatever works for you. But just, try and hammer that in. And then on the skills portion of the EMT class, so those are all testable skills. So like throughout your semester or your class, however long it is, like mine was 12 weeks, some are 8, some are shorter, some are longer. You're going to be getting academic testing, and then there's also going to be skills testing. So everyone's probably a little bit different. For me, there was and I think for most, there's like a big final exam where you do the big academic final, and then you also have the skills final where you run through like every single skill you can think of. So there are YouTube videos that I'd recommend watching, and maybe I can add like the link to the channel or something in the description here. But basically, they go through just every single skill, like one by one. They're all separate videos. I remember watching like every single one a few times before my exam, and that helped me a lot because you practice it in class, but you're getting so overwhelmed with like all these different things that you're learning. So it can just become a lot to take in all at once. So taking the time at home to watch it, practice your commands, go through the motions. Some of the stuff you could just kind of do like by yourself, like imagining the scenario. Obviously not everyone has a KED or like, a backboard or, a BVM, like an air mask, ventilation kind of thing. But you can, still practice and watch how the skills testing goes just to be familiar so that you're more prepared. So that's a huge thing. You have to know pretty much every one of those skills and be ready for any of them. The laws and the rules are always changing, especially in California, as far as like what EMTs are being expected of. Like I remember originally I was taking stuff and we weren't allowed to administer certain drugs, and now those laws are changing. So just make sure you're able to like update yourself on what laws in your state are being changed or what's being added to the EMT's repertoire. So that would be kind of like the two main parts of the EMT school, is the academics as well as the skills. And you got to take both of them seriously. I probably spent a little bit more time on the academics than the skills as far as like studying and preparation, but definitely don't just think that you're going to breeze through either one. So then after EMT school, you go through the whole class. You're passing all the exams. A lot of the exams you have to get an 80% or higher, and then they might let you do like a retake or something. Every course is different. That's how mine was. And then the final as well, and the skills final. So then after you get through all of that, then you go and take your National Registry exam. And so that's how you become certified with what's called the NREMT. And I should also mention as well, a lot of EMT schools require you to have your CPR card, and you can get that with the American Heart Association. It's just like a one-day thing. You go and it's like a BLS CPR certified kind of thing. And then that shows that you've kind of taken the first step to get into more advanced things with EMT. So definitely recommend checking that out. It's pretty cheap, especially compared to EMT school. EMT school, sometimes you're looking at like $1,000 plus. It just depends where you're at. Some community colleges have EMT programs, some are private. So, but anyways, going into the NREMT, I definitely recommend taking that national exam as soon as possible after finishing your regular EMT course, because if you think about it, all the information's fresh. You just were studying for the final. You've been taking all those exams throughout the course. Like, you've been studying. It's fresh. It's in your mind. Like, don't be thinking like, oh, well, I should take a couple months off to study for the national. Like, schedule it as soon as you can. Like, I think I gave myself like 2 weeks or something, and then so I still had like some time to kind of debrief a little bit, but then also just like stay in the zone with studying right after the final, and then I was good to go. So it is a tough exam. I've taken it before and not passed, because I went through a time where I went to the EMT school, and like I said, I took the national right away, passed it my first try, good to go. And then I had a bit of a career change with real estate stuff, and I let my pass expire. And then I decided to go and get the EMT license recertified, which meant that I had to go back and do all my continued education courses at a different EMT school. And then I had to retake the national, and it had been like 5 or 6 years since I had taken it. So I didn't pass, and then I just basically read the whole textbook, and then I passed the next time. So even if you pass once, it doesn't mean that you're going to pass every time, especially when there's been a lot of time in between. So just taking it as soon and as fresh as you can is definitely my recommendation. I know a lot of the instructors I've talked to have recommended the same. But you definitely want to be able to prep as much as you can for the National Registry while still not taking too much time between taking the class and the National Registry. So they have websites that you can pay for. I think I paid $30-$40, and it was basically just a bunch of practice exams, and it was one of those interactive things where it's telling me how I'm doing in certain categories. I knew to focus on certain things compared to others. Super helpful, as well as Quizlet. And then just kind of the most boring but also really effective is just straight up reading through that textbook. So those are kind of my 3 strategies as far as studying for the National Registry. And then let's say you're done with the National Registry and you're thinking about jobs. So there's kind of 3 main categories of EMT stuff. So what I did was I was a 911 first responder for a private ambulance company. So with that, we were basically let's say you're in Los Angeles, right? And then, a call comes out, a medical or a fire or a traffic collision, whatever it is. The fire department gets dispatched to that call, and then your ambulance gets dispatched to that call or that company, and they send whichever unit is closest. So that's what I was doing. Something similar to that, to being a 911 first responder, but isn't quite the same as a private ambulance company, is actually working for a fire department under their ambulance operator program. So it's called the AOs. And so only a select few amount of fire departments, especially in this area, do that. I know there's a handful, Downey and who else? Costa Mesa, the city of Orange, Torrance. Those are just a few around my area that have ambulance operator programs. So not every fire department has them. For me, when I was an EMT, LA County at the time, I still don't think they do. But they didn't have AOs. They didn't have ambulance operators working for their fire department. So then that's why we kind of teamed up. So that's kind of how being a first responder goes for EMTs. You have both options. Typically for ambulance operators, they're going to want you to have a little bit more experience. Some places, want you to have already worked as a 911 EMT, with a private company, like I did first, get your experience, and then, come in and work at the fire station. But working as an AO, as an ambulance operator, for a fire department is going to be a lot more pressure. You're getting supervised a lot more. You have higher expectations. You're literally working the same shifts and schedules as the firefighters. So really great experience if you're trying to become a firefighter. But keep in mind that like you got to be sharp and you got to be on it, because you're going to have you're going to be counted on by these firefighters, and you're not just like coming in and out. Like you're getting to know these people, working with them consistently, and there's going to be expectations when you're back at the station, just like a rookie firefighter or something like that. So great experience. Typically they're going to want people to be a little bit more seasoned before coming into that role, but you never know. So that's something to keep in mind if you're looking to get some good experience with kind of the culture of firefighting and getting to know that schedule, and make some good connections, obviously. So then we have IFT, which is interfacility transport. So that's going to be basically a position where you're not responding to like emergency 911 calls. I mean, it's not impossible for it to happen, I suppose, but pretty much not. I shouldn't even say it's not. Yeah, I've never worked that position. I've done ride-alongs with them, but to my knowledge now, I'm like 99.9% sure it's that kind of company literally never gets like a 911 call. So I'll have to double check on that, but I don't think so. But basically what their primary role is, regardless of if they rarely get a call like that or not, their main responsibility is to be like in the name, interfacility transport. So like there's times when a patient will be at one hospital and then they'll need to be transported to a different hospital, or they're ready to get released from the hospital and get sent back home, things like that. So it's a lot of driving. You're kind of just like getting patients that are fairly stable, and then just monitoring them, making sure that nothing goes wrong while they're being transported, whether it's to another hospital or to home, dialysis appointments, like stuff like that. So that's the IFT stuff. Typically, like those hours, their schedule can be a little bit more flexible. Sometimes they pay higher hourly compared to the 911 jobs, and I think a lot of that is just because the job itself, it's a lot less exciting. And so if you're going to EMT school and stuff like that, like you probably want to be involved in, feeling like you're seeing some interesting stuff. And so being a part of like the 911 first responder role, in my opinion, would probably be a little bit more interesting, a lot more variety in the kind of calls that you're doing. But it's different for everyone. Everyone has their own preference. And the last kind of thing is like specialty events and things like that. There's EMT jobs for amusement parks. Like I'm pretty sure Disneyland hires their own EMTs. So like special events, like some stadiums, like sports teams and things like that, amusement parks, just like big special events and stuff. Like some of them will have EMTs come from a private ambulance company to cover, and then some just do it totally independently. So that's kind of like your third option, like, not super common, but it is an option. And with that, I'm not really too sure as far as like what kind of experience they're looking for. I think everyone's going to be a little bit different. I know some guys that started right away with that, and they liked the flexibility of like pretty much just being like not having a set schedule, just kind of going in whenever. Like if they were free on that weekend, they'd go in and do a concert or whatever, and not having that commitment on the schedule. So it is possible to go in without any experience and start working a specialty event EMT job like that. So those are kind of like the top three. But one thing to keep in mind is like the hours. So with all those jobs, hours are going to be very different. For me, as a 911 first responder, and then I know from the guys I've talked to that are ambulance operators working for a fire department, the hours are very similar to a firefighter. The income isn't quite as much, obviously, which is why EMT jobs are typically used as like a stepping stone to get experience. You're networking, you're making good connections, you're sharpening your skills, on the medical response side. If you're looking to be a nurse or a firefighter or a physician's assistant, there's a lot of different types of people that want to go and get EMT jobs, or people that, just genuinely like the medical field and want to help out their community in that way. So a lot of different great reasons to work that kind of job. Typically one thing that I noticed is that it wasn't very common for people to do really long-term employments with EMT. Like most guys and girls that I like worked with and stuff, like, maybe a few years or something, but it was less common that it's like, oh, I've been doing this same EMT job for the last like 20 years or something like that. Like that's a lot less common. It is a stressful job. It is typically used as a stepping stone because of the pay for most of those jobs. But it is great experience if you're looking to get onto a fire department, or if you want to get more experience in the medical field to learn more, if you're looking to go into nursing school or something like that. So a lot to consider, a lot to keep in mind. It is possible. I would say that passing that National Registry exam is one of the toughest parts of the process. And then also just being able to handle the schedule. If you're doing 24, 48-hour shifts, getting used to having no sleep for some nights. You don't get, at least with 911 stuff, like you don't get scheduled breaks. So it's like you show up early and you're working 24 to 48 hours every time that you show up to work. So you get some overtime, of course. But also, like, if you plan on sitting down and having lunch and you get a call, then you're going. There's no like, hey, I'm taking a 30-minute break right now because I'm hungry. Like, that's just not how it goes. Or, hey, it's 3 a.m. and I'm tired and I haven't slept. If there's a call or you're getting moved up and moving around, then that's just how it goes. That's just the name of the game. So something to keep in mind and consider before working. Obviously, like, don't let it deter you. If it's something you really want to do, like, try it, go for it, tough it out. You start to get used to it. But it's definitely something to keep in mind. So if you're interested in going to EMT school, or you're prepping for the NREMT exam, or if you're certified and all done with both and just trying to decide like where to apply, just leave a comment. Let me know what you guys are thinking about for that, where you guys are at in the process. And then I would love to get in touch with you and help you out with whatever sorts of questions or things you want to talk about with that. So best of luck to you guys. And I'm also going to be starting a new EMT job here pretty soon. I didn't want to do something that was like a full commitment. I'm just doing something where I can kind of go in when it works for me and my schedule. So that's something new for me. But I just kind of wanted to get back out there and get some more experience with the medical side of things. So that's what's coming up for me pretty soon here. So I'll keep you posted on how all of that is going. And I'll see you guys for episode 4. Cheers.